We're going to be talking about our RoomSuite Modular System, which is a fairly new product released by Q-SYS this year. And just a quick thing, we're going to take you through why we released it, what the purpose of it is. We're going to talk about the hardware, the software, all of those things. So I'm going to ask that we actually wait on questions until sort of go towards the end of this presentation, because questions you have right now will probably be answered in 30 minutes. It's sort of a cumulative thing. We also were just not 100% sure how long it's going to take to get through this, because this is our first one of these. So bear with us. Throw your questions in the Q&A, but you might just not get an answer right out of the gate. So getting into this, here's our agenda for today. We're going to, again, talk about why RoomSuite, what it's doing, what it gives us, what part of the market it needs to be a part of. We're going to then talk about the hardware and software of RoomSuite. We're going to design a couple of systems and talk about the parameters and the sort of the rules around RoomSuite and what it can do. Then we'll talk about how to sort of scale it up and how to do mass deployments. And then summary, we'll have questions. Hopefully, if we have time at the end and we don't have as many questions, I can actually show you guys the RoomSuite software. I have a system that's set up about 4 or 5 feet away from me. So if we want to look at the software in real time, we can when we're all set and done. So for now, let's start getting into why RoomSuite. So in order to do this, we really need to talk about sort of the corporate campus and the different sort of levels and systems in a corporate campus. Now, I'm going to talk about a corporate campus. This can definitely be applied to education. This can be applied to hospitality. This can be applied to most enterprise AV applications. I'm just sticking with this because, number one, it's what I know from my experience, and it allows us to think through the hierarchy of what we're about to talk about. So talking through this, when we start talking about these corporate campuses, we have basically a pyramid of those spaces. And at the top of the pyramid, we have these really specialized, bespoke, I like to call them purpose-built spaces. They're built to accomplish or present a specific thing, like, say, broadcasting an all hands or some sort of very specific purpose. Often at a corporate campus, there's only one. They are often highly programmed, highly integrated, sometimes used maybe once a quarter. Then you get to the next tier of our pyramid. And the next tier of our pyramid, you have those customized spaces. A few on a corporate campus, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 1 per building. There's more of them than there are those specialized spaces. But they are still customized. They might be built around a standard function, such as training or a cafe or an auditorium or an all-hands space. But they are definitely customized to the space that they're in, and they are definitely using programming and customized interfaces and those types of things. Our next chunk of the pyramid is this is standardized rooms. Think extra large conference rooms, rooms with integrated audio. They have the same base equipment. They have the same set of equipment. They have the same features, but one room might be architecturally different than another room. So there's going to be small things. So I like to call them standard, but they're the rooms that are standardized, but there's always some little tweak for the specific space that they're in. Maybe one has 1 display, one has 2 displays, but they have the same basic thing. And then we get into what we would call mass deployment rooms. These mass deployment rooms are all the same. We don't want them to be different. We want the user experience to be the same. These are the most used spaces in a corporate campus. There are small, medium conference rooms. They're rooms that people are in and out of all the time. And if you think about one of those users, if they're in building 1 and they go into one of these rooms, or in building 7 and they go into one of these rooms, we want them to have the same experience and the same things at their fingertips and the same interface, and everything needs to be the same. It's like they're in the same room, even though they're in different buildings. So this is sort of our pyramid of installation types. And again, I'm using the corporate campus as our as an example here, but these really do hold true. So if you take the education, you have an auditorium, you have a gym, you have a cafe, you have classrooms, and generally when you get to those rooms, again, that are used every single day, you want them to be the same. You want them to be as exact across the fleet as you can. Every time you create something that's a unique thing in the fleet, it's that much harder to maintain, right? So let's talk about where Q-SYS falls into this, how we fit into this right now. Not talking about RoomSuite. So before RoomSuite Modular System was released this year, where do we fall into this this pyramid? And the simple fact is, we've been at the top of it. Not saying that in like an ego way, but we've been doing those specialty spaces, those custom spaces, those one-off spaces that require all of that custom programming, all of the equipment, all of the flexibility that comes with Q-SYS Designer, the interoperability that comes with Q-SYS Designer. And we really haven't had a lot of good success or haven't had good fits for us in those smaller rooms. So if we think about it, if you take what we've been doing in the bigger rooms and the training rooms and the event spaces and apply that to a smaller room, you look at all the gear that you've got in here. So let's look at that. We have infrastructure. We've got a core, video endpoints, a network switch. We've got all of the endpoints that are our peripherals. We've got cameras, microphones, loudspeakers, third-party devices, lighting controllers. You've got whatever you're using for conferencing. I think that we're at a point in history where I don't know that there's many rooms that exist that aren't using conferencing, maybe gyms, but not a lot of spaces these days don't have some capability for conferencing or BYOD. And in order to accomplish these rooms, we have to use Q-SYS Designer. We have to have a custom UCI. We have to tune the room, and it takes time. Imagine taking that down to a smaller conference room and having to do all of those steps and take a day to configure and commission a room. That's not scalable when you have 300 rooms. It would take you an entire year to commission that. So you've got all of this, and then you've got what would be the DSP file that might have all of this stuff in it. And yes, in those standardized rooms, you can reuse these, but there's still a technical overhead for deploying them. And that technical overhead, in every room, you have to configure the network switch. In every room, you have to give everything IP addresses or make sure that everything is talking. You have to set host names. You have to do all of that, regardless of whether or not you're reusing the DSP file. So I think the problem space that RoomSuite is trying to solve is those smaller rooms and is getting a lot of that technical overhead out of the deployment of these types of rooms so that you can deploy one of these in, say, an hour. And if you think it's not possible, I can actually tell you I can set up and configure my RoomSuite kit in about 15 minutes. Imagine being in an actual room where you're going to have to actually, troubleshoot if there's a cable problem or something. I think you could have the room up and running in an hour with a codec, with BYOD, all of those things. And that's what we're going to talk about. So RoomSuite Modular System, why have we done it? This is why. We want to be able to have something that's easy to deploy, can easily fit into standardized and mass deployed systems, and has a low lift for deployment and integration into those spaces. So simplified deployment, easy to physically install, network connections wherever possible. With configuration, it is a web browser, and it's going to be a pretty familiar looking web browser. And then the simplified system management that also allows for mass deployment, mass firmware updates, all of those things. This is the why of RoomSuite. This is the three basic tenets that we've built the product around. And I think you'll see we're well on our way to accomplishing that. So now that we've actually talked about why, let's start talking about the hardware. Bum, bum, bum. RoomSuite Modular System base bundle. That's actually how you're going to order it. The base bundle comes with two pieces, which is the RMP100 processor, the QIO Ven 4 expander, It does come with a bunch of USB-C and HDMI cables, so there's a cable package that allows you to get up and running quickly. If you go to our spec sheet, it tells you exactly what the counts are on those cables. But basically, the RMP100, it's the core, it's the brains of the thing. The QIO Ven 4 is just like most of our other QIO boxes. It is an expander box. So it's an expander for table connections. So let's take a look at these a little bit more closely. So first things first, on the RMP100, imagine this being either behind a display or in a small credenza rack. It does have a rack mount kit that is available. The USB connections on the RMP100 are for AV and USB bridging. So imagine having the RMP100 behind a display with a codec, connect it via USB-C, and you're off to the races. There are 2 HDMI inputs and 2 HDMI outputs. We have some limited control ports. I think when you start getting into these smaller rooms, these aren't as necessary, but we did add some for some very specific reasons. We wanted the display power, so you can actually control the displays in the room via CEC, Ethernet, or serial. So there are 2 RS-232 ports. And then we also included a GPIO to be able to connect a 24-volt analog occupancy sensor. So in a lot of those smaller rooms, you do have occupancy sensors. So those are the things that we're doing for control. And that's that port, that big Phoenix block off to the right there. And then in the middle, we have this aux network. The aux networks really operate similar to what the core network ports do now on a Q-SYS core. It allows you to have a connection to an enterprise network, reflect, get out to the outside world, all of those things. But one of the nice features of the RMP100 is these aux ports are separated from the integrated 8-port network switch. They're not bridged together. They don't talk to each other. They don't communicate with each other. So you're not, surfacing a bunch of MAC addresses or having a bunch of multicast traffic put onto an enterprise network that may or may not be expecting it. And then we get to the integrated network switch. The integrated network switch is really kind of it's like the selling point, or one of the best selling points of the RMP100. We don't want you to have to throw a network switch and do all that wiring behind a display. We want you to get the cables, plug them in, and get setting the system up as quickly as you possibly can. We're going to talk about the PoE stuff in a little bit more detail, but let's move on to the QIO. Note that if you look at port 1, on this network switch, you'll notice it's a different class. It's a class 4. So we're actually providing a higher power output on that, and that's to power the QIO Ven 4. So that's actually to send power to the QIO Ven 4, which then also has 4 more network ports for connections to touch panels and table microphones at your table. So again, with Q-SYS really putting an emphasis on keeping as much in the system connected via network as possible. You only have to run 1 cable to the table, and then you can connect all your devices there. That's a pretty important thing. Installation in smaller rooms, you want it to be as streamlined as possible, and I think that this does that. So also on the Ven 4, we have a USB-C. That USB-C is for content encode and USB bridging. You have an HDMI input that also does content encode. And then you have the USB connection, the USB-A connection, again, if you want to have USB bridging. So 2 different places you can do it. As you can sort of start to see this form in your mind, though, you can see, oh, I've got the RMP100 behind the display connected to the codec. I've got the table connected to a laptop. I have BYOD. I have my compute in the room. I have all of the things that I need to be up and running very quickly in a system. And we've talked about the network switch. So what this would look like in a small system is you have, again, the room processor. This is just a BYOD system where you can see where all those green cables, if you have an HDMI cable or a USB-C cable, those things are all very, very short runs, and still only that 1 network cable between the display and the table. All right, we're going to keep going. I do see there's some questions. I'm going to hang on some of those questions, but we'll keep going for now. You know, the other thing for this is RoomSuite Modular System works for more than just BYOD. We can do Teams, we can do Zoom, we can do bring your own meeting, anything that we can do, because the RMP 100 is still a DSP, you know, under the hood, and it's still processing audio, and we still are able to route it to where we want to be able to route to. So now that we've talked about that hardware, we're going to talk about the software. We'll let you guys just sort of see a quick just run through of the software. The thing that I like to talk about right here is it looks a lot like Core Manager, and that's pretty purposeful. We wanted to have a unified look and feel for management of larger fleets so that when you are in Reflect looking at a core, or you're in Reflect looking at a RoomSuite modular system, that you are very familiar with the platform. You're not trying to relearn a web browser or a web GUI. So I think that we've really done a good job of that. And the nice thing about RoomSuite is all of the configuration is done through the web browser. There's no Q-SYS Designer software. You can customize the UCI. You can set up the inputs and outputs. You can link all the peripherals. You can do all of those things quite simply through the web browser. The other thing that I like about the software is there's actually some other sort of, I don't want to call them hidden capabilities, but we've added some things. The ability to do room system optimization. There's a word that you don't want to say at 9 a.m. And edit tools, you can use it for testing and configuring audio when you're using Q-SYS peripherals. The nice thing is that all of those things can be done or triggered through Reflect. You can trigger them remotely. So you can actually run this room system optimization in an empty room with nobody sitting in the room and know that it's getting you to a pretty good starting point for that room to be fully operational and functional. All righty, we are chugging along. I'm probably talking way too fast. We're going to talk now about building a system. And we're going to talk about some of the hardware capacities of the RMP 100 and the QIO Ven 4. And I'm going to stop right now. Josh, your question, will the USB-A port on the QIO Ven 4 be USB 2.0 or 3.0? I believe it is 3.0. And I can look that up. Are you looking it up?
It's not supported. It's for future use.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted I wanted to double check that too, because I'm like, because it wouldn't be for bridging because it's an A.
No, because that's a USB-C.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of times those are on the board we purchase, or it's for future use. So yeah, so we'll go ahead and get
just like the antenna connection. It is exactly. A USB 3.0 though. I have looked that up, that it is actually that. And then the next one, why no external power supply for the expander so it can power a laptop? I don't know if that's in the works or not, but that's certainly something that we've brought up as we've done testing. I think that the idea with keeping everything on a single power supply is that you don't always have power under a table. You can't always assume that you're going to have that in place. And we want to make it so that these can be deployed just about anywhere. I mean, you could, if you had a little round, high top table, as long as you can stick the Ven 4 in it, you can have an AV system in there. All right, so let's talk about some systems.
Yay.
Yay. So the first rule of RoomSuite is understanding the available ports and PoE supply for both units, how they're divided up. This is the constraint of the system, right? This is where you hit the limits of what you can do with RoomSuite. So I'll just say a couple of I'm going to say some things that feel like they're idiot things, but they've actually come up more than once in our testing here internally. You have a 12-port network switch, basically, between the RMP 100 and the QIO Ven 4. But one port is dedicated to the QIO Ven 4, so you have 11 network ports. No more, no less. The ports and the switch you don't have to do any configuration on them. You don't have to do any setup. You don't have to do any programming of that network switch. but you can't expand it. Plugging in a network switch into this network switch will probably break a whole lot of things. I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know exactly what goes wrong, but we've been told that that's not supported. So you have 11 ports, which means you have 11 peripherals or 11 things that you can plug in. So that is item number one. Of those 11 things, you have a 212 watt PoE budget. So let's talk about that. We have 75 watts of that PoE budget going to the QIO Vem4. That is dedicated for the QIO. It powers the QIO, and it also gives you 50 watts at the table for those peripheral devices like microphones and touch panels. That leaves us with 130 watts available at the RMP 100 for all of the rest of the peripherals, say ceiling microphones, ceiling speakers, those things that we want to plug in. So consider PoE and port count as two of your primary design constraints when looking to specify the RMP 100 into a system. One good thing is another sort of built-in tool is the software will actually tell you what you're using in terms of your PoE allotment and your PoE budget. So keep an eye on that. It's really nice to have that in front of you. So if you have an issue, it will immediately tell you where you're over or what the problem is, and you can immediately rectify it from there. So talking about our 11 ports, we need to sort of talk about what we want to plug into those. And that's where we get into some of the rules of the road of what our maximum quantities are for each of these peripherals that we may want to use in a system and in a small room. We have the network loudspeakers, and there's some slides that we're going to go through this. And you can just see the limits. I've got them on there. We're going to talk in all of these about about all of these in a little bit more detail. The cameras, the touch panels, and the microphones. First things first, we support the 7-inch or 10-inch TSC touch panel. We support up to 2 of them. They can be plugged in wherever you want to. You can plug them into the RMP 100. You can plug them into the QIO Vem4. But you have a maximum quantity of 2. So we have 2 UCIs that we can surface to those 2 touch panels. When we get to the NL series, you can have a total of 6 speakers. But the 6 speakers have a few constraints. So you can use 4 of our NLP4 or NLC4 speakers, or you can use 2 of our SB42 speakers. We've tried to keep it in this family because we want to make sure that any connections or any cabling that you run up into the network or out to the speakers stays as network cabling. Again, we're trying to make this easy to deploy, so no speaker cable, no hooking up speaker wire, just plug in network cables. So we are gearing RoomSuite towards these peripheral limits and towards the network loudspeakers that we actually sell. And again, we have the NLP4, which is a pendant, the C4, which is a flush mount ceiling speaker, and the SB42. And you can see those maximums. If you do want to use 6 speakers, it has to be 4 of the NLP4 C4 and 2 of the SB42. You can't just use 6 of the NLP4. So be aware of those constraints there. The NMT1, you can use up to 4 of them. And that has to do with how much echo cancellation we have available to us in the RMP 100. So we're going to actually take a look at that and in a little bit more detail here. The one thing we do support, and I think this is kind of a nice little add-on to the RoomSuite, is we actually support a Dante stream coming in and a Dante stream going out. So if you had, say, a Shure MXA 920 in the ceiling, you can bring in the auto mix output, and then you can send an AEC reference back to the microphone in a room that's maybe a bit larger room. You can mix and match with 1 ceiling mic and 3 NMT1s. We only support 1 ceiling microphone. So if you've gotten to the point where you need 2 ceiling microphones in a room, please go get a Core Nano or a Core 8 Flex and use a more traditional Q-SYS system. But for this, a lot of times you have rooms that are that it's a large conference room, but you still want it to be pretty standardized. Well, we can get a ceiling mic in there to cover a larger table. And then again, you can still do one ceiling mic plus 3 of the NMT ones if you so choose. I'm going to take a second here and answer the one question that Matt asked. Will the PoE budget show projected or just live usage? It depends on what you're doing. When you build a preset in Reflect that's a pre-configured system, I believe it will show you projected. And we could double check that. But the live usage is when you're actually live on the RMP 100, it shows you that. So I think it depends on whether or not you're setting up offline configuration or if you're online with the device.
Also, I've answered this question once or twice already. Yeah, we'll send out the slide deck in a PDF version once within about a week. You'll get a copy of this recording and the slide deck in a PDF. So just for everyone to know that.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And then, so cameras, we can do 2 NC series cameras. So that was our last category of peripheral. You can mix and match them. You can do 2 PTZ cameras. You can do 2 of the NC90. So you can sort of mix and match if you have, again, a little bit bigger room where you want to have the NC90 in the front and maybe a presenter camera that you can switch to if somebody gets up and talks in the front of the room. So you do have a little bit of flexibility there, but we do only support 2 cameras with RoomSuite. I mean, I'll be pretty blunt. Most of these rooms, you're going to be doing a single camera. So I think 2 is more than enough to cover the spaces where this is really an effective product. All right, so let's go back to this little diagram that we talked about. Now that we've introduced RoomSuite, what this changes to is pretty interesting. I like to point out here that the infrastructure is a lot less. We're now a single cable between the table and the display. We still have our compute. We still have a UCI. We still have Reflect, but we're using a web browser to commission. Reflect gives us some mass deployment tools that weren't necessarily there before. And you can have a room up and running in about an hour. And as long as the physical installation is done and sound, I think an hour is high. I think that I could probably from 0 to 60 have a RoomSuite kit that's been installed properly up and running in about 15 minutes. So all of a sudden, those 300 rooms don't take a year to install and commission. Those 300 rooms might take a month. So we talked about the parameters. You now know all the rules, all the box that you're within with RoomSuite. Let's actually start looking at a design. We're going to do 2 different designs here. So we're going to start with a BYOD, bring your own meeting, bring your own laptop sort of room. And once we're done with that, we're going to then add in a conferencing codec and actually start working our way through bigger rooms and adding more details to this. But let's just start with this. So our customer has very appropriately put in a wedge-shaped table because they understand camera sightlines. And they want to have microphones on the table. They want to have loudspeakers in the room. They want to have cameras. They want to have a touchscreen controller. And they want to be able to bring their laptop and access all of that. So what does that look like with RoomSuite Designer? Let's start with the base bundle. So we start with the base bundle. We have the room processor behind the display, expander at the table. And we're going to go ahead and throw a couple of table microphones. I think we could probably get away with 2 in that space with that size table. So we're also going to throw a couple of SB42s, and let's go ahead and put them vertical and put them on either side of the display. So it looks very, very purposeful and intentional, and nobody complains about the unsightly speakers that are in the room. So that now is going to look like this. We have our speakers and we have our microphones. So we've managed to do audio with all network cabling, which I think is pretty cool. And we still only have the 1 cable between the TV and the table. So we're doing all right here so far. So let's add BYOD and cameras to this. We need some video. What is that going to look like? Well, what that's really going to look like is our laptop is going to connect via USB-C to the QIO VM4. Our cameras can connect to the RMP100, or if you want to run another cable to the table, you could connect it to the QIO VM4, but let's keep it behind the display for now. And our display, I think we only have one display in this room, but if we had two, we actually are just going to use the HDMI output of the RMP100. So what is that getting us? What that's getting us is a couple of things. One, video from the USB-C connection is being sent through that connection between the QIO VM4 and the RMP100, and the RMP100 is then outputting it out the HDMI. The other thing that's happening in the reverse is the camera and all of the audio that needs to go back to the laptop for BYOD and conferencing through that laptop is being sent through the same connection and the same USB-C cable. So we've got a pretty simple system with pretty simple wiring so far. Does the RMP100 support 5K? Tony, I don't know the answer to that. I know it supports dual displays, so technically if you have a single display, you might be able to do like 21.9 with it, but I have not tested it. So we'll have to find that out and let you know. 4K for sure. All right, so let's look at what we have with audio and video now. So now we have audio, video, camera, the full system is all connected. We have still one network cable. Our HDMIs and USB-Cs are short runs like we want. And everything is automatically linked in the RoomSuite processor, and all the processing is done, and you don't have to do any additional configuration. You just have to link them to the right ports on the network switch in the software, and you're off to the races with this. So now we have the last part of the thing that we want to add. Let's add some control. So we want to throw a touch panel on the table. That touch panel, maybe we need it in a BYOD room, maybe we don't. Please don't give me you don't need it in a room like this. I get it. We're getting one, and this room is getting one anyways, because who doesn't want to sell more boxes? But in all seriousness, we're trying to do this to sort of, show what the system can do. So take this with the grain of salt that it needs to have. So we have touch panels. Now, when you get into the UCI with RoomSuite versus Q-SYS Designer, the sky is the limit, right? You can do anything you want on one of our UCIs. If it's doable with CSS, if it's doable with Q-SYS Designer, you can do it. RoomSuite, we've pared that down a little bit. We've got some options, and we've got some things that you can do. You can change colors to match a color scheme. You can add a background. You can add a logo. But we're not opening this up. We want this to be unified. And I think one of the things is, one of my friends used to say, we don't want to create snowflakes. And I think the UCI is one of the most important places there to have consistency. So it would be nice to be able to do all the bells and whistles, but I think it's also nice to not have to do any programming at all, and to be able to just upload a logo, throw in the company colors, and be up and running, rather than having to spend a day before I get to site writing a UCI. So a couple of cool things that we have as part of this, though, that's nice, is we do have the ability to have the UCI actually support Microsoft Teams, Zoom Rooms, or BYOD. If you select Microsoft Teams Rooms, we actually have a preloaded CSS that actually matches the Microsoft interface, and the same with Zoom, where we are matching the Zoom interface with our interface. So I think that there's already some of that pre-built support for what you're trying to do with the space already in there. And then again, you can change the colors, you can change how it appears, all of those things. I'm going to answer the next question. Do the USB-C and HDMI input on the expander show as discrete sources? Yes, they do. And they are not auto switched. You actually, as soon as you plug in, it pops up a thing on the touch panel that allows you to select what you want to use. John, hi John. Has the USB-C on the Vent 4 been tested with a power injector for a laptop power supply? We don't support that at this time. I don't know if anybody has tested it. We've had our RoomSuite kits for like 3 weeks now. So I think that somebody will be checking that and testing that soon. But just to be super clear that right now we don't support that. All right. Last fun thing for control. On the control side, we have already done all of the control sync and call sync for you. So regardless of whether or not you're using a compute, regardless of whether or not you're using your laptop, we are syncing the light ring on the microphone, we're syncing the sound bar, we're syncing the actual lights on the side of the touch panel. Mute is red, unmuted is green out of the box, but you can actually go in and change what those colors are in the web browser. But we've actually done all that for you. You don't have to do any programming to make that work. We actually just did that on under the hood for you to start out with so that you can get up and running a little bit faster with the system. All right, so now let's look at our room. And now we've got control added. So we have a little occupancy sensor. We have a touch panel. And we're still only one cable between the display and the table. I think we're doing pretty good. And all of this, we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 network cables and only 3 non-network cables. I think that's where we start seeing RoomSuite Modular System be very, very effective in the small to medium to large conference room market, where you can walk in with all your network cables, you install one cable in the floor, and you're done. And you can actually get this system up and running very, very quickly. All right. So now that we built a simple BYOD room, let's add to it. Let's add a conferencing codec. Let's talk about how big we can go. Let's talk about how we can do mass deployment, all of those fun things that, again, we've talked about designing one room, but where RoomSuite Modular System becomes an even more useful tool is with being able to create presets and do mass deployments and mass firmware updates. And that's where you have that management side of things that allows you to really be deploying at scale. No, the network cable does not need to be shielded. So I just got asked, does the network cable need to be shielded? No, none of these. Cat 6, Cat 6A, both will work fine. All right. So let's look at our bigger room. Now we've got an in-room conferencing codec. We've got a bigger table, and we still want to have content share and BYOD because, you know, the CEO uses Google Meet while the rest of the company uses Teams, and he needs to be able to walk into any room and plug in and use Google Meet. So we have to accommodate that. Let's work our way through that. And I see the questions. I'll get to those in a minute here. So let's just start with the conferencing codec alone. And we're going to talk through what this would look like without RoomSuite in it first, and then we'll actually add in RoomSuite and see how it changes the configuration. A lot of times you'll have the UC compute and you have a controller on the table. Sometimes that controller is a network controller. Sometimes that controller, it needs a USB connection or a USB extension kit back to the UC compute. And usually in a lot of these systems, you can plug in content share to the controller. I will just say that a lot of times that's a really low resolution because you're sending a touch panel interface one direction and video the other direction, and you're doing it over a USB connection that may or may not be high bandwidth. Some of them are, some of them aren't. It is really dependent on the product. So you could also connect the content share directly to the UC compute to get a higher resolution content share. But if you want that laptop to still be at the table, you now have to put in an extender. And then all of your peripherals are connecting to this. So you have, you know, whatever your audio IO is, whatever your camera is, whatever your microphones are. If you're in a room that's a little bit bigger and you want to use a ceiling microphone, well, then you're adding a Q-SYS core or some other processor to go along with it to feed into the UC compute. And I think that, this is fine. This is a fine configuration for a small room. But what if it's a weird room? What if it's got acoustic problems? What if it's, again, a little bit larger, a medium conference room, a large conference room? This starts to sort of, I hate to say, outpace itself or get to the point where it's harder to make these dedicated just compute rooms work the bigger the room gets. So let's go ahead and throw in the room processor and the expander and talk about how all this is going to work. We still have our UC compute, we still have our controller, but we have the RMP 100 that is connected to the UC compute via USB for audio and cameras. And then the HDMI output of the RMP 100 would feed into the content share input of the UC compute. Now you have available to you the inputs on the expander and the inputs on the room processor as possible options to send to that content share. You've just expanded the capability significantly. And then let's add our content in BYOD. You'll notice that I still have the laptop connected via USB-C. One thing that the RMP 100 will do is manage not only the USB bridging to the compute, but if you actually want to use BYOD and the compute in the same time, we will make sure and just automatically handle getting audio and camera video where it needs to go. I think this is one of the things, as I've been testing my RoomSuite kit, this is where this starts to be really cool, because all of a sudden you just have something handling where things need to go, and you don't have to do much other than worry about making your call. This is a good point. I'm going to stop. Could this work in a non-BYOD setup, like with a Logitech Roommate, Poly Studio, G62, et cetera? Obviously, that's what we're talking about now, Scott. So yes, that UC compute could be a roommate with a TAP IP. And I think if you wanted to have the Poly G62, you could do that as well, as long as the Poly G62 will allow USB bridging from the Q-SYS device, which I think it does. I just don't know if we have any documentation about it specifically. In a BYOD space without a touch panel, can display controls and source selection be automated? Can those two displays be controlled via RS-232? So the first question is one that we've actually brought back already to our development team. I think you're absolutely right. In a small room that's BYOD, do we need the touch panel at all? And we've actually asked them to take a look functionally at how that would work and whether or not that automatic source selection can happen. So it's a great question, and one that's already been brought up by our applications engineering team internally. Can those two displays be controlled via RS-232? Absolutely, they can. We have support of most manufacturers' displays already pre-built in. You just have a drop-down menu where you tell it what it is, and you don't have to do any extra work. If it is something that is specific, they want this, wonky display that's only made up on a mountain in Thailand or something, we can actually get some RS-232 commands in there if you need to. All right, so let's talk about what this looks like here, just so everybody has an idea of what we're looking like. I do think that this is a little counterintuitive, and I had to look at it a second and go, huh? And that's because we're using the RMP 100 to be the content input of the compute unit, and having the compute actually feeding directly to the displays. So if we wanted to have control of the displays, we would have to use RS-232 or LAN, because CEC wouldn't be available to us. Or we can let the compute actually use CEC and manage it. Some rooms like Google Meet kits actually will manage that for you. And I think some of the Lenovo Teams kits will do that as well. So The reason we're doing that, though, is to allow for some video switching before it goes into the content input of the compute unit. So looking at this from a network perspective, this is one where I think that it's important to bring this up because it's something that I think there may be an update coming that may change this, but for right now, you're actually going to need 2 LAN connections for your compute. In order to have a UCI as a second page experience on the controller that you're using for your UC compute, you do need to have a LAN connection to our 8-port network switch here. And then the aux LAN out to the outside world, to the enterprise network, and then the normal connection of the compute to the enterprise network, just like you would normally configure. If you don't want to use the second page experience, you don't have to, but you're still going to have some way to control the room or some way to select inputs. So that's where you get into the world of maybe another touch panel at the table, which that just scares the crap out of me. How many touch panels before a user just gives up on you? So let's take a look at this, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you can do BYOD with this room, right? Obviously, the compute can run a call. Obviously, we've got content share. We've got USB bridging, so audio to the compute. But I want to take a look at this. If we're using the second page control, let's just start with maybe with Zoom. In Zoom, if you actually select the laptop, that is the USB-C connection, and I'm being real specific, you have to select the USB-C connection regardless of what you're calling it. Once you select that USB-C connection, you can then select the BYOM or bring your own meeting selection in Zoom. And that will actually basically run it the same way as if you were connecting your USB-C, say, directly to that compute or a roommate. I think this is really kind of neat. I've tested this now and it works and it's so cool. I know I get excited. And then in Teams, it's really the same thing. Just looks like a Teams panel, but this is the second page experience in Teams. And as soon as you select that USB-C connection, you can select BYOM, and all of a sudden the call is being run through whatever laptop you have connected via USB-C. So all that configuration is automated, and you don't have to do anything to make it work. You just have to make all the connections. So now in our room, we've done all the things. Pretty cool. We've done a large room. We've done a small room. Tony, you asked what is first page versus second page. Funny you should ask that because I'm going to explain that here in just a second. So thinking about this is a boardroom. This actually is a room in our experience center in London. And it is running off of a RoomSuite Modular System. You can see we have 4 microphones. There are 6 speakers in the ceiling, NC90, and the 10-inch touch panel. So room's actually in service. And I've seen James, who actually works in this experience center. I've seen him on calls in this room. It sounds and looks pretty darn good. Mitchell, any remote display solutions available now or in the future, strictly HDMI and an extender only? Displays on the opposite side of the room or a projector and a display. There are no remote display solutions available at the moment. I'll just answer the first question because it answers the other 2 questions. So if you do have a projector in the ceiling from the RMP100 or from whatever the conferencing compute unit is, you would have to run an extender up into the ceiling. That is a correct assumption you're making. Now let's get into scaling these systems up a little bit. We're going to talk about microphones, and I'm using microphones as an example. I think we can all see how these can apply to, say, a 4-person room or a 6-person room, but how big can we go? Where's the line that we can go on the upper side of this spectrum before we really do need to get into an integrated system? So there's a couple of things that I think of when I start thinking through that process. One is really the physics of the room, and I'm using the NMT one as an example. So, we can support up to 4 NMT ones, and that gives us, the NMT one, you can really have about a 6-foot radius on your coverage on those. So, you could look at, you know, 4 of them at a table. You can have pickup on a table that's up to 24, 26 feet long. Use your knowledge of AV and the design specs and the peripheral counts of the room suite system to sort of design your systems. I think you can go probably all the way up to the point where, like I said earlier, where you would need that second ceiling microphone. So if you can do it with a single ceiling microphone or a chunk of table microphones, that's really where your upper limits are going to be. When you run out of speakers, that's where you're hitting your limits. So those are the things that you want to look at in terms of when do I go from RoomSuite Modular System to just a regular Q-SYS, give me a core, give me all those other things that we're looking at. And every design is different. We could probably go down a rabbit hole on this, but I just use good Navy design principles and then understand the guidelines that we've talked about here in this presentation. All right. And Tony, I haven't forgotten about you. We're going to get to your question in about maybe 5 minutes. Monitoring and management. So we've talked a lot about how to design a system and how to create a system and how to create a system with a compute, how to create a BYOD system. Now we need to talk about how do we manage this thing at scale. This is where, again, I think this starts to get really good. Just a quick thing, we have Q-SYS Reflect. It's a remote monitoring and management platform. One of the big things for this is all of your room suite systems and all of your cores are going into the same place in Reflect. You're managing all your Q-SYS systems from a single location and from a single interface. So you can log into a core, you can log into a room suite system. To do all of that, you do need to have Reflect Plus. Reflect has 2 tiers. We have Reflect, which is free, and Reflect Plus, which has some pretty nominal monthly charge. And Reflect Plus is where you can actually start doing the mass deployment and having those tools available to you. So talking about that, if you've ever used Reflect, if you go into Reflect, you can actually create presets for Q-SYS cores. So you'll see that you can have a Q-SYS designer system preset where you could have maybe a JSON file where you can load configurations to cores or have configuration updates available to cores. Our demo kits here at Q-SYS actually subscribe to a preset. And now there's a new preset option called RoomSuite Modular System. This is where you can actually create an entire RoomSuite modular configuration without actually being connected to a RoomSuite system. And then as RoomSuite systems come online, you subscribe them to Reflect. And once you subscribe them to Reflect, you can add them into the preset and they will basically self-configure. This is where we start getting into that availability of being able to do this at scale and being able to manage it at scale. The other thing that will allow you to do is if you have a whole bunch of RoomSuite modular systems subscribed to a preset and you want to push firmware to all of those systems, you actually just go in and change that firmware in the preset and it will push that firmware out. So you can do mass firmware updates with this. And again, it does require the paid version of Reflect. But it is really kind of where all of a sudden you don't actually have to step into the room to commission it. You can do 99% of that with Reflect, a web browser. And so your install team gets the system online. They give you a code, you add it to Reflect. Once it's added into Reflect, you throw it into the preset, let it push all the settings back down to the system in the room, trigger the room optimization audio setup remotely. And as long as everything is connected properly in the room, you've got a functional system and you haven't actually set foot in the room. So other features of Reflect, we have Space Manager, we have all kinds of tools. We're adding tools to Reflect on an almost daily basis. We see updates constantly. We're using real estate core standard ontology for all of our space management. We've also got Systems Explorer, which allows you to tag and categorize systems as you see fit for your enterprise. We also have the ability to link into ServiceNow if your enterprise or if an enterprise specifically wants to have a consolidated portal or consolidated dashboard for all of the devices in a building. We have that API has been released and is available in ServiceNow. So lots of features that allow you to do the management. So we have a few more minutes left. We're going to talk about the one thing that is important here, and one of the things that also helps the RoomSuite management system be as robust as it is, and opens up a whole nother world. And Tony, this is going to answer your question about the first page versus the second page. When you have a system, and by the way, this feels a little bit like burying the lead because Q-SYS Connect is freaking awesome, and we're talking about it in the last 3 or 4 minutes of this webinar. Let's look at this system again. So we've talked about this system, we've talked about it is. Let's talk about this touch panel in a little bit of detail. So that controller is connected to the UC compute. The UC compute is actually hosting, let's just say Zoom. The Zoom UCI or the Zoom touch panel is natively being hosted on that controller, right? Now, it says plus second page control, and that's because we have the ability to embed a Q-SYS UCI as a page flip or second page experience in that controller. So in most of these rooms, that's what we are doing, and that's what RoomSuite is doing. But let's actually talk about what some of the options are there. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get everything into a single pane of glass that was an agnostic pane of glass? So let's talk about maybe some of the limitations here. So that room controller might be USB. It might be a USB-C long cable that you have to run back to the display. It might be an extender going to a link box that has to go back to the display. It might be a network device, but that network device might have to talk through the network back to the compute. All of these present, problems. There's a couple of big things about how these displays work. Most often, they are a display output of the compute PC. So it's a touch monitor, essentially, is what's being hosted. There are limitations to that, especially with the small form factor PCs, like say a Roommate or a Nook or something small, is that you have limitations on how many of them you can have. In most systems, you can have one touch panel. In a lot of systems, again, you have that second cable that has to go to the table. So this is where we introduce Q-SYS Connect, where when you add Q-SYS Connect on board, whatever the compute is, you actually turn that whole interface of having that room controller, we turn that upside down. We basically flip the script a little bit. So you see the Q-SYS Connect software becomes the virtual touch panel that sends and receives information from the UC compute. So it sends that PC display to a Q-SYS touch panel, and then sends all the touch data back to the UC compute. So all of a sudden, we're actually running everything and controlling everything on the Q-SYS side, which is, I think, like I said, this is kind of burying the lead to me. So Zoom plus Q-SYS Connect is all of your control and everything is on a Q-SYS TSC touch panel. So what did that do for us? Like, why would we do that? Well, there's a couple of big things. The first thing is we've now gotten rid of that second cable to the table. We're back down to one cable because we can plug the touch panel into the VEM4. The other thing, we can have two touch panels. So now all of a sudden you can have up to 2 touch panels with RoomSuite. And if you're using Q-SYS Connect with a regular core, you can put as many touch panels as you want. So this is a pretty big thing for getting us out of that. We have to have 1 touch panel on the table. Well, what if you have a boardroom where you want one at the front of the table and one at the back of the table because it's 30 feet away and you don't want somebody to have to get up? Or what if you want one on the wall? Or what if you want to have so that as they walk in, they can just hit start the meeting and go sit down and do their thing? So I think that this is one of the really big things that is coming from QSC on the software side, especially. And I'm pretty excited about what that can do for us. So you've made it. We've made it to the end. I have been talking for an hour. My voice is about shot. So let's talk about RoomSuite Modular System. I'm going to re-show this screen again. I like to show this at the beginning and the end because, again, these are the 3 sort of pillars that we've built RoomSuite Modular System on. And then I think that's it. I think I've got this fun slide that's a really cool, like all the things that we talked about in here. You can read all that on your own. And if you have any other questions, I'm here to answer them. Let's get into it. I think I've gotten most of them throughout this webinar. Whew. And I can take a deep breath now. I think we've gotten them. And Mitchell, I've actually answered Mitchell's question.
Yep. Do we have if nothing sticks to Teflon, how does the Teflon stick to the pan? There'll be one of those in there, I'm sure.
You just made my brain hurt. Sam, can the second touch interface via UCI on a tablet, or is that reserved for regular core systems? I believe somebody tried it and it actually works, that you can just use UCI Viewer as long as that tablet is on the same network. So that's going to tie up quite possibly one of your network ports on the RMP 100 because that UCI is being served by the RMP 100. So I think though that somebody actually connected a tablet and it worked fine through UCI Viewer on their app. Any room scheduling options? I haven't heard of any. It would be lovely. That's all I can say to that. Mark, they're recording. Yes, this is being recorded and it will get emailed out to you. Oh, yeah, thanks, Dan. Any other questions that anybody has about anything we've talked about? I'm sure most of you know that you've got Q-SYS reps all over the country. Please feel free to reach out. We all, not all of us, but we have enough of these RoomSuite systems in circulation in the US that if you're looking to get a demo or take a look at it, we are absolutely able to help with that.
We got one more question that slid in.
I'm familiar with using Crestron's page flip feature to switch between Zoom rooms and the room's control interface. Does Q-SYS Connect allow you to get all the controls in one interface? No, you're still actually switching between the Q-SYS controls or the room controls and the Zoom interface, but we're actually hosting the Zoom panel. So essentially, we're doing the same thing that the Crestron system is doing. I will stop sharing there. And I'll take this moment to thank everybody for sitting through an hour of talking about RoomSuite. Hopefully I haven't bored you all to death. My family doesn't let me talk about AV anymore, so this is my outlet for getting to do this.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, awesome. No, thank you for the inaugural run here. I know James is giving it in the UK, but I appreciate you taking it out there and look forward to great opportunities for people to find with this product. I think it's going to be there. We'll be if you've got other people that want to kind of get a lowdown. I know there was a lot of questions about recording and PDFs and all of that. My plans are for probably the next 3 to 6 months to try to run this webinar. If not monthly, every other month at least. We do have some other products announcements coming out as we get into summer, so you'll see some of those. Really trying to reshape. We're always going to have the standards here, you know, with the gain structure and the clocking. We're going to mix those in because they're common things that we see in support questions, and that's part of what we're doing. But I really want to try to feature a 3 to 6 month run on any new product, just so everybody can get some one-on-one here with it. So appreciate it, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day.